Hey, everybody, it's Natalie B. McKenzie with The Whole Woman, and welcome to this week's episode of Living Life Authentically with yours truly. I'm hoping you had a great weekend, and if you're anywhere in the northern part of the United States of America, I'm hoping you're warm and safe. Ooh, speaking of being safe, what a tragedy in New York City with that building fire. That's pretty gut wrenching to have lost so many people and so many children. That was a little harsh. So, our condolences to the families, and I am sure these people are going to need aid of some sort to just have clothing. And this is not the time to be homeless or need to be in a shelter. So we're going to keep them in prayer. We're going to keep an eye out to see what needs to happen. And maybe there's some way we can help them get their need heard and help them get some well needed clothing, food, whatever it may be. Because that's what it's all about, is helping our neighbors. So good evening. I'm Natalie B. McKenzie, and you're watching Living Life Authentically. Today's guest, ladies and gentlemen, is quite apropos in the spirit of helping our neighbors. He has over 20 years of business management experience, more than a decade's experience in nonprofit and humanitarian work, and he is the CEO of Eva's Village. We're going to tell you his name in a little bit, but he has a degree in business administration, and he's been a part of the senior management team over at Eva's Village for quite some time. But what I found very interesting, he'd only been there for about 14 months before he was appointed as the CEO back in 2021. It tells you that he was a dedicated member. As the CEO of Eva's Village, he has continued to be a firm believer in community, social service, and in the importance of anti poverty and wellness programs. He's reinforcing his commitment to the community and presently serves on numerous boards in the local area, including his role as board secretary for the Englewood Public Library. In keeping with him being such a philanthropist and one for serving the community, he was also elected to the Board of Education in the town of Englewood from the years 2012 and served until 2015. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome today's guest, Mr. Howard L. Haughton.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening, Howard. Welcome to The Whole Woman. How are you today?
I'm wonderful. It's great to see you.
It's such a pleasure to see you. You know, Howard, I was so eager to chat with you that I missed sharing something that I thought would be quite apropos. So if you hang tight with that lovely personality and smile of yours, I want to share this with our guests.
2021 was a challenging year for Eva's Village, but we are still here, providing nutritious meals and pathways to recovery and stable, secure lives for more than 5,000 individuals annually.
Our model is unique.
Our results are real.
Our success is measured one life at a time.
Our mission has never been more urgent. Please donate to Eva's today and give someone a better tomorrow.
Isn't that a better introduction? Welcome to today's
Love it.
show. Thank you for joining us. What a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure being here.
You know, Howard, I mentioned to you earlier that I've had the pleasure of seeing you across the room at many events. We've never formally met, and so it's my delight to have you here. But I'm even more excited to learn that you're such a public servant, that you've been giving back to the community so much. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what goes into the making of a man that has committed over 30 years of his life to serve the community. Where are you from, Howard? Where were you born and where'd you grow up?
So I was born in Brooklyn, New York. Lived there for 4 years before my mother and father decided they were going to move us out to Teaneck, and grew up in Teaneck, and obviously a delightful community, Teaneck High School, class of 85, go Highwaymen, and just a wonderful, diverse community that had a great impact on who I am as a person, surrounded by many people that had positive influences in my life. Growing up in Teaneck, I was involved in church. I went to Christ Episcopal Church in Teaneck, was an acolyte there, and of course, went through the Teaneck public school system. And from there, also while working in the community while I was in school and high school.
How,
I can keep going.
hold on a second, Howard. Do you have siblings? And tell us about your parents. What caused your parents to move from Brooklyn into Teaneck, Bergen County, where it seems you've spent all your life because you're still living and serving in Bergen County?
I equate that to the great migration that so many New York families did that heard about Bergen County and what was happening in Teaneck and Englewood and Hackensack, the diversity of the community. My parents decided that's a great community to look at and to live in. And so that was the reason why we moved.
And for our viewers who are not familiar with Bergen County and the towns you've just listed, the Hackensack, the Teaneck, the Englewood, tell us what was going on at that time, and also give us some context of professionally what your parents did and what was the big pull or push?
So let's just think back to, so 67 is when I was born, 70 is when we moved, right? This is the civil rights era, right? And this is just when people of color really started to have access. And mind you, in Teaneck and Englewood and Hackensack, when people of color went shopping for homes, remember, they were directed to certain sections of the community, not just any section. So while we had access, we had limited access. So it was an interesting time. We had access, diversity, but there were still things that our parents were engaged in and challenged by, with social dynamics that shaped and molded who we are as people today. And with that, know that my mother and my father moved my brother and I. My brother and I are 11 years apart. He's older, moved us over together. So he came over when he was 16 or 15. And back then, the age to drive was lower. So when we got to Teaneck, he said, I don't like these burbs. And he kept driving back to New York to go hang out with his friends.
Wow. So what did your parents do professionally, Howard?
So my father was in the military for many years, and at that time he was still in the military. He retired as a major, and his last post was at the 369th in Harlem. My mother was in insurance claims, and she retired from that industry after many years in the late 80s. So they really worked very hard to make sure that we had the life that we had. You know, working the overtime, and Dad working multiple jobs. Not only was he in the military, but he also was a music instructor and loved drum and bugle corps and taught music. And that's where my love for music came about as well.
Drum and bugle corps. Tell me specifically what that is. And now that you say it, I am now associating you with music in the Bergen County area.
Yeah, drum and bugle corps. So when you think of bands have woodwind instruments. Drum and bugle corps have no woodwind. It is brass and percussion. And the drum and bugle corps that I was involved in New York City and in New Jersey, highly competitive, and competed nationally with one corps that I was with. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful influence. It taught a lot about regimen and being disciplined. Just, it was a great experience. And working with people, you know, you see drills, and it requires that you know your place, you know your position, everything is timed. So it really is good. And for many people that didn't know my background, that also helps to explain a little bit of my rigidity between the military brat and drum and bugle corps.
I have to say, from a distance, I think you know my husband, but we've never met. And from a distance across the room, what I've always seen is a very linear person, in that you present yourself as a disciplined man. And that's very interesting. You're confirming the perception that we see of you. So tell us more about growing up in Teaneck and with the sibling 11 years older, you know, Bergen County. You mentioned the civil rights movement, and then the discipline at home. How were you flexing and growing and expanding as a person and adapting to all the change?
Oh, wow. So many things happened as I grew up, you know, whether it was wanting to get a job as a teenager. So There was the old Grand Union in Bergenfield. I worked there as a cashier. After being a cashier, I worked at a bank as a bank teller, all while being a teenager, all before graduating from high school. And I even had the pleasure of working in a liquor store in Teaneck, G&G Liquors, and knew the family very well. Our families were very, very close. And the influence there was unique because as a Black-owned liquor store and bar in the back, and the patrons that would go to G&G Liquors, what they did at night, the store would close, but there was music that would play in the background at night. And I remember, I really shouldn't say this, but I remember there was this song that would play, and when it played, everybody would get up and they would start dancing. And I remember watching them, how they would dance and whatnot. And it was Meet Me With Your Black Drawers On, a jazz song. But let me tell you, I'm going to just fast forward and let me just say, when I met my wife and we got married, what we gave out as a favor at our wedding, we put together a CD, and that was one of the titles on our CD. And we had folks calling up my in-laws saying, "Did you hear what they had on there? Can you get another copy of that CD?" But those were the influences, right? That my mother used to take me. My mother and father would take me to Broadway
You
plays
just
and
mentioned
musicals.
wife. Hold on.
Yes.
Where did you meet your wife? You've kind of level jumped on me there.
I did. I did. I met my wife so well after I graduated from college and well after I started my career. So a whole decade later, from working in Teaneck to starting a career and buying properties and being in real estate. So I met my wife and through a college friend, one of my line brothers. I'm an Alpha, pledged Alpha Phi Alpha. There we go. Okay. And I called him one day and I said to him, these women up here in the New York market, so much drama. I need a change of pace. Anybody you can introduce me to? And he said, well, have you stopped playing around? I said, yes, I'm serious. I'm ready. He said, I don't know. I said, no, I'm ready. And he said, okay, I think I have somebody I'd like to introduce you to. And,
wait, now is this post-college? This is post-college. Okay.
Yes.
So, all right. Okay.
It is. When I talk about my wife, I skipped over a lot of stories there. Yeah.
You mentioned pledging, and I'm like, wait a minute, I didn't get the story of pledging in college, but okay, I'm stuck on the wife too, so I want to hear about your wife.
Yeah, there's a story with everything. You know what? So I'll just say this: he introduced us over the phone. We met over the phone, talked a little bit, and I'd asked her if she would meet me, and she said sure. And I went to that meeting place at that meeting time, and she wasn't there. Didn't happen. And I thought, okay, well, that's interesting. I'll have to try something different, and I took a different angle of approach. And what I learned about my wife, she is such a lady, because the place that I picked to meet her was a sports bar. But my wife, with her upbringing, you will never find her going to a bar and sitting, at a stool and what have you. And so, I had to try again and invited her to dinner. And but before doing that, we talked on the phone for over 30 days, long distance, before meeting in person. And I have to tell you, we talked almost every day, and the connection was instantaneous. It was great. Yeah.
This is awesome. What is your wife's name, Howard?
Alicia Haughton.
Alicia Haughton. This is wonderful. So I'm going to have you go back. Where did you go to college, and what did you study?
So when I graduated from high school, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And I have to tell you, middle of the road performer, C student, right? Not sure what I wanted to do, not sure where I was going. So I went to Bergen Community College for my first 2 years and graduated with an associate's degree. And during that time, I even attended Pace University for one semester because I was thinking, Bergen Junior College, no, I got to do better. So I went to Pace. That commute into New York City killed me as a teenager, right? 20 something. I just couldn't do it. So finished up at Bergen. And then after Bergen, actually right when I was getting ready to graduate, there was the exam for the state police. And I thought, I think I want to do law enforcement. Kind of lines up with, my military brat background and drum and bugle corps. Sat for that, passed the physical, the psychological, what have you, and started having nightmares about pulling somebody over and getting shot, and kept seeing the same thing over and over again. Woke up, called the state police, withdrew my application, and that same day put on a suit and drove down to Richard Stockton College at that time, now Stockton University. Walked into the admissions office and said, "I'd like to speak to the head of admissions, please." Applied on the spot, handed him my resume, and he said, "You know what? You're accepted. Come on back down." So I just need to make sure I've got some place to stay when I come here. And they did. I came back down 3 weeks later for the fall, walked into the office where they were admitting people, or where they were accepting people to give them housing assignments.
Located?
South Jersey, Pomona, New Jersey. But the first day was the kicker, because I walked into the housing office and I said, "Hi, introduced myself. I'm here, here for my housing assignment." They said, "Welcome." I said, "Great, thank you. Waiting for my housing assignment." They said, "You're here." The very office where they were receiving people was the place where I was going to stay.
Oh boy. Okay. Is that where the students normally stay?
They do. They were operating out of one of the apartments, and I just didn't know it. So it was a little off-putting at first.
It's like, wait a minute. This is fabulous. Now, you studied there. You got a bachelor's in
Business administration.
business administration. Now, this is not the standard college that I would expect to find a chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha.
There are several of them around New Jersey. When we think about it, it's a liberal arts college. It's small. At that time, I think the enrollment was maybe 6,000 or 8,000 full-time enrolled. And the Black community there was even smaller, very small. So small world. But ironically, there were people there that I already knew who were from Teaneck that had gone to Stockton. So it was home all over again.
That's awesome. Howard, you seem to have had just a very, what I would consider mild-mannered life, and a middle-class life where things worked out because you probably followed the rules. Help me understand, paint a picture for me as to how you broke into the work world. How did building your career and getting you to where you are today start?
Really started by the modeled behaviors of those around me, what influenced me and who influenced me. I really didn't have a path, if you will. It wasn't thought out or planned or intentional. I knew I was going to college. I knew that was an objective, and that was embedded in my mind by my parents, especially my father. He was certain about that. And so I did it. And when I was graduating from college, I didn't know what I was going to do. I remember sending out resumes, and I remember, after I graduated, my first position was on Wall Street as an accountant for AIG reinsurance. But I have to tell you, it was boring. Great location to work, but I wasn't even old enough or mature enough to understand what was going on around me, and so couldn't appreciate it and left there. And that happened throughout my career a couple of times. From there, I went on to other places. So it was the people that were around me that kept talking to me and guiding me and suggesting different things and different opportunities. And that's what caused me to continue to try again. We say, it sounds like, a nice life. There were bumps along the way. There were gaps in my career early on. But those gaps were important for me to become who I am today. And that was to understand you kind of have to eat dirt. When I left AIG, I didn't have another position. So I had to go looking. So there was a period there where there was no income. And even though I was living at home, I needed to understand what it was like to not be employed and not have income coming in, and needing to pay student loans, and realize, oh crap, I've got to be more responsible.
Now, how did you stumble, your words, into public service, into the philanthropic world, into giving back in the way that you do now?
Working in the for-profit world, when you're working for the bottom line, whether it's shareholder value or profit margins, certainly getting those annual bonuses are great, but the grind was difficult. It was long hours. I will tell you, I worked in certain organizations. I would work till 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, jump in the car service, go home, take a shower, and come back. And then at the end of the week, would find myself volunteering, whether it was for the New York Urban League, where I sat on the advisory board, or other organizations, I found that I was having impact in the community. And that's what made a difference for me. And that's what caused me to realize, hey, if I'm working by day to go at night and volunteer my time, and that's where I'm really passionate and committed, let me see if I can find an opportunity that would employ me in that space where I'm so passionate. And that's what happened. After working in publishing and pharmaceuticals combined for about 13 to 15 years, I wound up going to work for City Harvest as their chief financial officer there. And that was a great first opportunity for me in the not-for-profit space in a paid role to have an impact. And ever since then, that's where I found my passion.
Now, were you already married when you made this switch?
No, in fact, I met my wife when I was at Cheering Cloud Pharmaceuticals. I was in my 30s. She would travel to come and visit from time to time, and I would travel to come and visit with her. I did that once. A little bit of an imbalance there, but it was delightful. We met in 1999, and actually, it was the year that my mother passed away, so I'm glad that she had a chance to meet my mother, and my mother to meet her before she passed. And so she passed in December of 99, and my wife and I, we were engaged in April of 2001. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. And so tell me about your family. Did you start a family with your wife? How did that whole shift impact your career? But Howard, I do wonder, going from for-profit to nonprofit, how did that affect your finances, and did that impact your relationship at all? Because that's a big switch. That's a career pivot. That's financial. That has a financial impact, I'm sure.
It does, but I have to tell you, there's something else that happened to me. I was in real estate for a number of years, and I had an opportunity to own multiple properties and make money from that. So my not-for-profit work was not as grueling and didn't take up as much time as the for-profit work did. So I had a good work-life balance. So it didn't impact me financially in the way that it could have.
That's wonderful. Tell me about your time getting into Eva's Village, because from what I hear and see, you got to Eva's Village and you went head first, all in, fully committed.
Yeah, so Eva's Village, I remember when I interviewed here, and when I first pulled up, Patterson being Patterson, and I had never been to Patterson in all my life, ever. The stigma for what it had, it was just like, oh, be careful. And I remember pulling up and I was thinking to myself, where am I going to park? Anyway, I interviewed. When I came here to Eva's Village, what I learned is that the organization has been here for 40 years, delivering programmatic services to the community for a long time, and we do it very well. But infrastructurally, we're like an infant. This organization didn't have email servers and email until maybe 6 years ago.
Wow.
So think about, you were walking around with Blackberries at some point in time, and that was long gone, and other technology was there. They hadn't had that here. So the back office operations didn't exist. The administration, was not as strong as it needed to be. And so I walked in, and it was easy for me to see the ways in which I could contribute and make a difference here, and have a huge impact. And that's been just it. Not only that, but also understanding when we say nonprofit or not-for-profit, that's a tax status. At the end of the day, not-for-profits have to compete for the same dollars, and they have to have an image and a brand that's better than the others, because if you're giving to an organization, you're choosing who you believe is going to give you the best value for your money.
Yes.
And a lot of people didn't understand that. So,
Howard, you joined that organization in 2021. That's the height of the pandemic. What is the mission of Eva's Village? Because I'm curious as to how do you go in to right a ship at such a time when talk about competing for dollars. Everybody is competing for these nonprofit dollars at a time when most businesses are hurting.
So actually, I joined the organization in October of 19.
Okay.
The pandemic struck in March of 20. We went through that first wave, if you will, and came out of it in 21, if you will, thinking, oh, great, everything is settling down. I became the CEO in 21. And now we're right back to where we were previously, but a little bit more intense because now this variant is so transmissible. It is hard, extremely hard. The first wave, people were highly responsive because the pandemic, everyone knew you were home, you weren't working, people needed help, food lines were longer, lots of issues. Today, there's COVID fatigue. Everybody's tired of being home, tired of wearing masks. Nobody's really thinking about, I need to help the person that can't get around because of COVID. The thinking is very different. So today is more challenging than what it was. And government dollars are not as freely available as they were the first time. Remember, we received a lot of financial support from the federal government. And in fact, it bridged some of our gaps at certain points in time between PPP-1 and PPP-2, as well as some additional COVID funding. PPP-1 and 2 are gone. We're not hearing about that again. And that COVID funding, right, it's what's left. So now, how do you survive as a business beyond that? And if you didn't re-engineer yourself the first time, then you're really in trouble the second time.
What exactly are the services that you render out of Eva's Village?
Eva's Village, very simply put, is a behavioral health and social service organization, healthcare and social services. We provide, on the healthcare side, mental health services, people that have used substances. We provide counseling, whether it is mental health counseling or counseling for addiction services. And we also provide outpatient services and residential services. We have halfway houses. In fact, Eva's Village has a very large halfway house in the state of New Jersey, one of the largest in the state of New Jersey, and a large population. We have men's, women, and children, one of only a handful of women and children's programs in the state of New Jersey. We also provide on the social services side, shelters, men's and women's shelters, formerly known as overnight shelters, no longer overnight. So we have people that have long stays here as we're trying to help them to get back on their feet, and we provide food services. So in that video that you showed, we usually bring people inside into our community kitchen to eat, and we serve them. We treat them as guests as they are, but because of COVID, we've had to take them outside and give them pre-packed meals. And so whether it's men or women or children, we're giving people food that come out to our lines.
Now, for your shelters where people are residing now, how are you managing social distancing and still being able to provide as many beds as possible?
We've had to reduce the number of people that we're able to take in and cause people to be socially distant, whereas before, as congregate living facilities, you literally could have a couple of people in the same room simultaneously. So we've had to reduce those numbers. That means that we're not helping as many people as we'd like. And that means that the crisis is growing because there are more people that are out in the street and in need who aren't getting access to services.
How can we support you? How can those viewers out there learn about supporting Eva's Village? And what is it that you need most?
First and foremost, let me just say this. Eva's will be celebrating its 40th year this year, 40th year anniversary. And I'm proud to be the CEO here when we celebrate this. It is my goal, my objective, my mission to establish an endowment for Eva's Village, so that if you want to give to Eva's, and this is where you can be most helpful, anyone, in giving to Eva's, if you would give a sizable one-time gift, we won't come back and ask you again. We'll ask you one time, and we'll establish that endowment, and your gift will give in perpetuity because it will be there to continue to serve the community that's in need.
And what is it that you consider a sizable gift, Howard?
Well, frankly, 6 and 7 figures, right? Hundreds of thousands of dollars to millions of dollars. So yes, we're talking to the people that can do that. And believe me, there are many people in this state and the surrounding states that can do that. And for those that can't, please, a gift of any kind would be tremendously helpful, because your gift helps to bridge the gap, and it helps us to be able to say yes to children, yes to women, and yes to the men that are on these lines who need the help.
Excellent. And your website and social media handles, please?
evasvillage.org, and you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Eva's Village, and Facebook Eva's Village.
Fabulous. Ladies and gentlemen, we've had the pleasure of speaking with the very disciplined, eloquent, and committed Howard L. Haughton, the CEO of Eva's Village. They're located in Paterson, New Jersey. You can visit them at www.evasvillage.org. So let's support them. And that sizable donation to go towards that endowment, 6 or 7 figures. But if all you have is $6 or $7, I'm sure they'll take that too. Thank you so much for chatting with us, Howard. And it's a pleasure. We wish you luck and congratulations on 40 years of service.
Thank you. Truly a pleasure.
Our pleasure. So, ladies and gentlemen, here you have it, another episode of Living Life Authentically with yours truly. And we want to remind you that here at The Whole Woman, we have Lady Mist available for you. And Lady Mist is our way of giving back to the community. Image is not perfect right now, so we're going to get that right. We want to make sure that you know how to get access to Lady Mist, our candle, our body butter, and our hand sanitizer. Yes, you still need to hand sanitize. And after all that sanitizing and hand washing, you want to moisturize. And at the end of a day, or if you're still working from home and you're sitting around, but you want to create that great atmosphere, our candles are perfect for just that. Lady Mist was specifically and specially created for us, the fragrance, by School Scents with Tiffany Rose, and School Scents created our candle. You can get our candle, our body mist, our body moisturizer, the body butter, our body butter that was created in collaboration with Mamacita Buttercream, and of course the hand sanitizer with Shoe Cosmetics. This is available at twww.thewholewoman.com. And if you stumble over that, just go to Instagram, send us a direct message. We're _whole_woman at _whole_woman. That's on Instagram, and on Facebook right here, The Whole Woman. And feel free to DM us and we'll respond. I'm Natalie B. McKenzie, and here at The Whole Woman for 2022, we are focused on joy. The pleasure of knowing you are loved unconditionally is the best way to find joy. I wish you enough life to live, enough joy to give, enough love to share. Have a good night.